So I was just thinking about history and thinking about what it is that the study of history does for us. I mean, if we're going to be studying history, we're hopefully learning about ourselves, certainly. But what is it that history grants us when we begin to learn about it? Certainly, all those names and dates and facts, those are important because knowing them gives us an idea of when things happened. But it seems like history does more than just telling us when things happened. If we look at the word itself, historia, which is an inquiry into something, historia also has a parallel word to it in histor in Greek. And histor in Greek means one who sees, one who knows. And that seems to suggest that history gives us a perspective on things. Namely, the perspective that it gives us is that it sets things in order. You know, when you are inquiring into things and then setting your answers into order, you begin to see things as ordered or patterned. History gives us this sense that things repeat, or that there's a pattern, or that human nature responds in such and such a way to events that occur around it. And consequently, we no longer see the world as one darn thing after another. That vision of one darn thing after another is what somebody who doesn't have a vision of history seems to have. That is, they perceive of events happening randomly and just no cause and no effect. But when you start setting things in order, you begin to see things in order. You begin to see patterns. Consequently, it seems like history broadens our perspective. We get a broader view of the world by seeing the origins of things, where they come from. And as soon as we do that, we no longer are trapped in events happening right at the moment. That being trapped in the moment is called the tyranny of the now. And what a sense of history does is it seems to break that tyranny of the now. And you know what I mean. I mean, there are people who get upset over every single thing that happens, or they think whatever happens is the first time it's ever happened, or they think when it's happening it's the worst thing ever, and there's a sort of hyperbolic sense of the world, like everything is just so off the charts horrible, or everything's getting worse and we're just going to plummet in flames. Well, the reverse of that, everything's getting better and we're just going towards a happy, bright future. Both perspectives seem to be very narrow, and they think that whatever's happening right now is the best or the worst. As Dickens said in the opening of Tale of Two Cities, people with this vision think it's the best of times and the worst of times. That's the tyranny of the now. And a sense of history tends to help us to break that being trapped in the tyranny of the now, that mind-forged manacles thing that William Blake talked about. That is this sense that everything is the best or the worst that's happening right now. Namely because we see it happening before. It also causes us to have a hierarchy in our mind of what's really important and what's not important. Because the study of history will show us that human beings have been through a lot of really bad stuff. And whatever's happening now might be minuscule in comparison to, say, the outbreak of cholera in the 19th century England, or the Civil War that happened in the 1600s in England, or the time period of the Black Death that occurred in the 14th century, or the starvation period that occurred in 1315, or whatever it was. The tsunamis, the floods, the long winters, the periods of warfare, periods of chaos and miserably eking out an existence from the ground. All those things that happen in the past, when we start studying them, we start to put our own experiences into perspective. So it gives us a perspective where we begin to see the things around us as not so significant, perhaps, not so overbearing. It also grants to us, I think, a sense of history grants to us an idea of sympathy for other human beings. Because the more we study history, the more we realize that human beings, whether they are villains in history or whether they're heroes in history, are always human beings with human problems and human issues. And we begin to see back to an Egyptian back in the year 3000 dealing with problems the same way that I'm dealing with them, or dealing with the same problems perhaps in a slightly different way, which could give me more perspective on my own problems. One way or the other, we begin to see this pattern and this order, which gives us perspective and gives us vision, puts things into their place, and gives us a hierarchy. It breaks the tyranny of the now, so we're no longer in a prison. We feel much freer, much more open. And all of this leads us to the idea that what history really seems to grant to us is a vision of our own possibility for happiness, our own possibility for what we would call salvation in a Christian perspective. And once we get to that point and we look back on all those events, Augustine said that's what we call providence. Providence is looking back from the point of maturity or intellectual development or spiritual growth, looking back at our past and seeing all those little events that led up to that. If we want to extend it, all those little events that led up to the human race surviving on this planet. Consequently, a certain humility and gratefulness for the fact that you and I are here talking about this issue, which might not be the case at all. History ultimately makes us free people, capable of standing on our own 2 feet on this planet. And for that, I'm very grateful. Be seeing you.